Hello mga ka-learners, it's me again, Teacher Rem, and welcome back to our math tutorial. Rational and irrational numbers. Before I discuss this lesson, let us have a short activity first. I want you to identify whether the following are rational or irrational numbers. I will give you 10 seconds to write your answer. Your timer starts now. Time is up. Before I reveal the answer, let us have discussed first about rational and irrational numbers. Let us start with its definition. Rational numbers. The word rational is derived from the word ratio, which means quotient. A rational number is any number that can be expressed in the form of P over Q, where P and Q are integers, and take note, Q is not equal to 0. Example of rational numbers. First, integers. Again, according to the definition, it is any number that can be written in the form of P over Q, where P and Q are integers. And when you say integers, these are whole numbers that can be positive, negative, or even 0. Let's have 25. 25 can be written also as 25 over 1, where 25 is what we call integer and 1 is also an integer. Yes! Another example, negative 8. Negative 8 can be written also as negative 8 over 1. And our P is negative 8 and our Q is 1. Negative 8 is an integer and 1 is also an integer. And again, as long as Q is not equal to 0, that integer is an example of rational number. Did you get it? Another, terminating decimals. A decimal number that contains finite number of digits after the decimal point. And when you say finite, the decimal numbers can be counted. Ibig sabihin, nabibilang or limited ang decimal numbers. Examples, 25 hundredths, or we also read that as 0.25. Another, negative 10 and 36 hundredths, or we can also read that as negative 10.36. And 15 and 7 tenths, or we can also read that as 15.7. Another example of rational numbers is what we call repeating decimals. And these are the numbers that have one or more repeating numbers or sequences of numbers after the decimal point. On the first example, we have one repeating number and that is 5. And the second one, we have two repeating numbers and these are 3 and 2. And these two examples are what we called rational numbers. Now, let us proceed to irrational numbers. Irrational numbers, it is a number that cannot be written as a simple fraction. Examples, non-terminating and non-repeating decimals. When you say non-terminating decimals, these are the one that does not have an interm. Meaning to say, kung ang terminating decimals, the decimal numbers can be counted. In this example, or non-terminating decimals, these are the decimal numbers that cannot be counted. Okay? Non-repeating decimals. And these are the one that does not have repeated terms. Examples. As you can see, we have an ellipsis symbol here, or the 3 dots after the decimal numbers. Nang ibig sabihin nito, it represents continuous or never ending. Did you get it? Another is what we call non-perfect roots radicals. Say for example in square root, these are the square root of all terms except perfect squares. I repeat, these are the square root of all terms except perfect squares, are irrational numbers. And in cube root, these are the numbers which are not perfect cube. Did you get it? Example, square root of 5. Since 5 is not a perfect square, we can say that it is a rational number. Another, cube root of 10. Since 10 is not a perfect cube, so we can also say that it is a rational number. Now let us go back to our activity earlier. We will put check if the given number is rational and X if it is irrational. Let us start with 100. What do you think? Correct. 100 is rational number. You can also write that as 100 over 1, where 1 and 100 are integers and 1 is not equal to 0. Another, 2 over 5. Correct. It is also rational numbers, where 2 and 5 are integers and 5 is not equal to 0. And you can also write that in decimal as 4/10. And as you can see, this is an example of terminating decimal because we have only one digit after decimal point. Did you get it? Now, square root of 3. What do you think is the answer? You got it. Since 3 is not perfect square, we can say that it is a rational number. Why? Because if you're going to get the value of square root of 3, you will come up with non-terminating decimals. And as you can see, we have ellipsis symbol. Again, when there is an ellipsis symbol, meaning to say, the numbers are never ending. What about 1 and 45 hundredths? Yes, that is rational because this is an example of terminating decimals. Did you get it? Again, when you say terminating decimals, the number of digits after decimal points can be counted. What about 5 over 0? Great! This is irrational. Why? Although 5 and 0 are integers, but the denominator is 0 according to the definition of rational. It is rational number if q or the denominator is an integer and not equal to 0. But in this case, our denominator is 0. So therefore, it is irrational. What about this symbol? Yes, it is what we call pi. Is pi rational or irrational? Correct. It is also irrational numbers. Why? Because if we're going to get the value of that, you will come up with non-terminating decimals. Next, square root of 9. Correct. Square root of 9 is an example of rational number. Why? Because 9 is a perfect square. If you're going to get the value of square root of 9, you will come up with positive and negative 3. And the last one, you got it. That is irrational. Why? Because of the ellipsis symbol. Again, this symbol represents never ending. And I hope may natutunan tayo sa ating lesson for today about rational and irrational number. Again, this is Teacher Rem na nagsasabi, hindi man lahat ng tao ay mahilig sa numero pero pag nalaman ng sekreto kung paano matuto, masasabi mong, love ko to. Goodbye and God bless.